Have you ever witnessed a young genius pushed to the brink by cruelty and prejudice, only to spark a revolution with his brilliance? Let me tell you the story of Marcus Freeman, a 14-year-old whose quiet entrance into Westlake High School signified far more than just the start of another school day. Marcus slipped into his advanced calculus class in his worn jeans and second-hand sneakers, feeling the weight of a world built for those born into privilege. Every polished hallway and manicured athletic field reminded him that he did not belong, and yet fate had placed him there among the privileged few. In that very classroom, his teacher, Ms. Veronica Winters, a veteran of the school known for her icy demeanor and a heart hardened by years of bias, made it abundantly clear that Marcus was an unwelcome anomaly. When Ms. Veronica Winters snapped for the class to settle down because there were visitors present, she casually mentioned Marcus' unusual background and declared that he must demonstrate his abilities before the school board members. It was a challenge laced with condescension and thinly veiled disdain. The atmosphere turned heavy as Ms. Veronica Winters drew a complex differential equation on the whiteboard, a problem culled from her graduate studies at Princeton, an equation that far exceeded the curriculum and cut straight to the core of Marcus's vulnerabilities. The classroom fell silent, except for murmurs and whispered cameras, capturing what everyone anticipated would be his public humiliation. Marcus could feel his heart pound like a marching band as he stepped toward the board, every step echoing the painful reminder of a lifetime of being underestimated. His mother, Marcia Freeman, had always warned him that being intelligent and black meant being forced to work twice as hard to win half as much respect, and at that moment, her words resonated deeply. Despite the ridicule and malicious sneers from students like Taylor Williams, whose life had been paved with the privileges Marcus could only dream of, a quiet storm of resolve began to build within him. As Marcus picked up the marker, his hand trembled not from fear, but from the realization that every equation he would write was a form of quiet rebellion against a system steeped in racial bias. With each careful stroke, he transformed the whiteboard into a testament of his skill and an irrevocable promise of retribution against those who had long degraded him. Ms. Veronica Winters continued to taunt him, her voice dripping with false concern as she dared to question whether his words were anything more than rehearsed recitations. Her cruelty was palpable, and her eyes shone with a cold satisfaction, as if every dismissed question and every unwarranted jab had been meticulously plotted to break his spirit. Yet Marcus pressed on, his voice growing stronger and more assured with every calculated move. In that charged moment, as the echoes of disparaging laughter vibrated in the room, he silently vowed that every injustice, every sneer, and every act of discrimination would one day be repaid in a spectacular display of retribution. He would not only shatter their prejudiced perceptions, but also transform his pain into a triumphant answer that would leave everyone in awe. His journey, born of hardship and defiance, was only beginning, and Marcus Freeman promised himself that the scales of justice would soon tip in his favor. In the charged silence of that classroom, doubt began to creep across Marcus Freeman's furrowed brow, even as he fought to keep his steady hand on the whiteboard. His mother's soft warnings echoed deep in his heart. The world is not fair, and sometimes standing out only makes you a target. From somewhere near the back of the room, he heard Zoe's barely audible whisper, "You got this," which bolstered his fading courage. With a deep breath, he resumed drawing elegant lines of mathematical logic, each symbol an act of defiance against the disdainful expectations of those around him. In this sanctuary of pure numbers and unwavering principles, Marcus felt for a brief moment that here there was no prejudice, only the majestic, unyielding truth of mathematics. Yet the harsh clicking of Ms. Veronica Winters' heels against the linoleum floor reminded everyone that reality, with its deep-seated biases, was never far behind. Ms. Veronica Winters circled the front of the classroom like a predatory hawk, her gaze narrowing as she watched Marcus continue his work. "Mr. Freeman, we do not have all day," she snapped, her tone growing tighter with each passing minute. The subtle sneers and murmurs from the class only spurred her further, and her voice took on an edge of bitter impatience. "Almost finished," Marcus murmured quietly, refusing to be pushed into haste. In that tense moment, Ms. Winters could not hide the growing confusion and reluctant admiration in her eyes as she realized that Marcus's approach, though far more sophisticated than the standard curriculum demanded, was unfolding with precision and elegance. The silver-haired school board member, Dr. Carter, slowly rose from the back of the room, his eyes fixed on every calculated stroke Marcus made. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation and unspoken challenge as Marcus delicately added the final terms to his equation, stepping back to reveal a solution that glowed with honest brilliance. A hushed murmur rippled through the room as Ms. Winters leaned forward and whispered, almost in disbelief, "That is impossible." Yet her voice was loud enough for everyone in the front row to catch. Regaining a semblance of authority, she demanded sharply, "Mr. Freeman, where did you copy this from?" It was an accusation loaded with suspicion and prejudice, a refusal to acknowledge the possibility that brilliance might come from a source unlike the usual privileged candidates. Marcus's heart pounded as he met her gaze. "I did not copy it," he said, his voice soft but growing firmer by the second. "That is the solution," he declared, allowing his work to speak for him amid the stunned silence of his classmates. To Ms. Winters, a freshman from a modest background demonstrating such advanced knowledge was nothing short of suspect. She insisted that his achievement was proof of academic dishonesty rather than the blossoming of extraordinary talent. A freshman could never possibly grasp these concepts on his own, she argued, her tone seething with malice and a deep, unspoken bias that cut to the core of Marcus's identity. Marcus recalled bitter memories of earlier years, when a teacher had wrongly accused him of cheating on a state exam, or when a middle school librarian had doubted that he had even read the advanced physics books he borrowed. Yet, in that crucible of pressure, instead of crumbling, he stood his ground. Dr. Carter, the silver-held board member, stepped closer to the board with an expression that balanced skepticism with curiosity. "Interesting approach," he remarked in a neutral tone, carefully scrutinizing every line of Marcus's work. The defiant young man clutched his marker, feeling the weight of every disparaging glance thrown his way. For years, Marcus had hidden his genius behind a facade of mediocrity to avoid drawing harmful attention. Now, in the face of adversity, he no longer wanted to shrink. He wanted to shine. With a calm yet resolute voice, he challenged the classroom and his teacher. "I can explain every step, and I can solve another problem if anyone doubts this one." Under the unforgiving glow of the cold fluorescent lights, Marcus began to unravel his strategy in detail. He explained how his solution had combined elements of Fourier analysis with the classical separation of variables technique, linking the problem to a well-known heat diffusion scenario with non-uniform boundary conditions. Every word he spoke carried the weight of his struggles and the promise of his future, while each phrase exuded a quiet confidence that belied the years of inner turmoil he had silently borne. Ms. Winters's initial sneers faltered as her expression shifted from arrogance to disbelief and alarm. "That is graduate-level analysis," she interjected sharply, clearly unable to reconcile the evident depth of Marcus's understanding with the thin excuse of a self-taught youth. "Yes," Marcus replied simply, his tone devoid of arrogance, yet brimming with the undeniable truth of his statement. "I study advanced calculus independently." His clear articulation of complex theories left no room for argument. Yet Ms. Winters' chagrin grew as she watched her carefully constructed narrative of his inadequacy crumble before the eyes of the assembled board members. Dr. Carter, his curiosity deepening, questioned Marcus further. "Young man, where did you learn this particular technique? This is not material typically covered until advanced university courses." Before Marcus could answer, Ms. Winters interjected again. "Dr. Carter, I believe we are witnessing an unfortunate case of academic dishonesty. He must have memorized this solution." The words were not only a direct challenge to Marcus's integrity, but also a damning reflection of her own biases. In an attempt to maintain a semblance of objectivity, Dr. Carter calmly turned to her. "That would be remarkable, considering I modified this problem from a recent MIT doctoral examination," he stated, his tone measured yet pointed. Turning back to Marcus, he asked, "Would you mind walking us through your reasoning, particularly how you handled the boundary singularity?" With steady resolve, Marcus returned to the board, his voice clear as he meticulously explained each step, his explanations laying bare not only memorization, but an innate, profound understanding of the mathematical principles at play. As Marcus concluded his thorough explanation, Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully and declared, very impressive and entirely correct. The air in the room shifted perceptibly. Even Taylor, once a relentless source of ridicule, now looked on with uncertainty and a trace of admiration. Yet, the victory was bittersweet. Ms. Winters, her face now pale with wounded pride, began gathering her papers with a deliberate urgency, eager to end what she considered an aberration in her classroom. "Mr. Freeman, remain after class," she demanded coldly, her tone dripping with insinuation, as if his performance was merely a spectacle. The remaining board members, along with Dr. Carter, exchanged knowing glances as they prepared to leave. In the charged aftermath of the demonstration, Marcus found himself summoned to the principal's office, his heart heavy with both vindication and apprehension. There he faced Principal Davis, Ms. Veronica Winters, and 2 board members, including Dr. Carter. On the desk before him lay his treasured, dog-eared notebook, a private testament to years of secret study and a lifeline of hope in a world that had too often dismissed him. Principal Davis's voice was grave as he announced, "We found this notebook in your backpack." The words stung all the more because they represented not only an invasion of his privacy, but also a challenge to the very soul of his identity. "You went through my backpack without permission," Marcus protested quietly, his voice tight with emotion. In response, Principal Davis insisted that when academic dishonesty is suspected, every measure must be taken to verify the truth. Ms. Winters wasted no time in opening the notebook, her finger pointing accusingly at a page filled with intricate equations. "These calculations are beyond what most undergraduate students could produce," she said, her tone laced with disbelieving condescension. "Are we expected to believe a 14-year-old from your background developed these independently?" The quiet insinuation of his background, though never overtly racial in its wording, cut Marcus deeply as it confirmed his worst fears, that his abilities were being undermined by prejudices as old as time. The room fell silent, the truth hanging in the air like a heavy shroud. Dr. Carter's presence, however, lent a sliver of hope as he carefully flipped through the pages, his expression evolving from skepticism to genuine admiration. "Mr. Freeman," he said softly, "could you explain this derivation here?" Pointing to a series of complex calculations dated 3 months earlier, Marcus leaned forward and began to recount his journey through the labyrinth of Navier-Stokes equations and vector calculus. "This is my work on fluid dynamics," he explained, his voice steady even as his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I was inspired by a documentary on aircraft design. For 10 long, tense minutes, Dr. Carter methodically questioned Marcus on various sections of his notebook, each explanation reinforcing the authenticity of his profound understanding. Finally, Dr. Carter closed the notebook and, with a nod of quiet respect, placed it gently on the desk. "Principal Davis, Ms. Winters, I have heard enough," he stated, his voice firm yet compassionate. "Not only is this unquestionably Mr. Freeman's original work, but it demonstrates a level of sophistication and originality that demands recognition rather than suspicion." The decisive words, spoken in that solemn moment, resonated deeply within Marcus. In that cramped office, surrounded by voices steeped in authority yet marred by prejudice, Marcus felt both the crushing weight of a lifetime of discrimination and the fiery spark of a triumphant future. This was not merely a moment of academic vindication. It was a clarion call for justice and retribution, a promise that every act of bias would one day be repaid in a spectacle that would leave the world in awe. In that instant, Marcus Freeman vowed that he would no longer be invisible, that every sneer and every dismissive glance would someday fuel a revolutionary answer capable of toppling an unjust system. Marcus Freeman's demonstration had reached a fever pitch in that tense office, and the room was buzzing with an energy that seemed to shake the very foundations of Westlake High. Dr. Carter spoke with a calm authority that resonated deeply with everyone present. "With all due respect," he began, "you are not here solely to evaluate our students. I removed my glasses earlier to remind you that as the district STEM education advisor and a school board member, my duty is to stand up for exceptional talent. I have devoted over 30 years to mathematics education, and in all my experience, I have encountered only 3 students whose natural ability rivaled Marcus Freeman's. Yet instead of fostering this brilliance, I have watched him be publicly humiliated and then accused of dishonesty, his talent questioned because of outdated prejudices and baseless assumptions. His mathematical intuition surpasses what many of my doctoral candidates at MIT could demonstrate on an average day. Ms. Winters pressed her lips into a thin line, her face reddening with indignation as she tried to muster a rebuttal. She attempted to say, with all due respect, that I am not here to judge our students, but my purpose is precisely that. I am here to witness the extraordinary, and when I see a genius like Marcus being castigated not for his work but for who he is, I cannot sit idly by. Principal Davis shifted uncomfortably in his chair as Dr. Carter continued, his tone firm yet measured. In my 30 years of teaching, I have come across very few students with Marcus's natural flair for complex mathematics. Yet here I stand, troubled by the injustice of seeing him, a young man of remarkable intellect, accused of cheating simply because he does not conform to the expected norms. I ask you, Ms. Winters, could you clearly explain why Marcus Freeman's solution is mathematically valid? Not whether you believe he developed it independently, but please elucidate the mathematics for us. Faced with this challenge, Ms. Winters blinked rapidly and stammered an answer about Fourier analysis. Dr. Carter interjected gently yet resolutely, could you explain why his handling of the boundary singularity is particularly elegant? Ms. Winters fell silent, unable to provide a satisfactory answer. Her inability to articulate the very concept she had so dismissively critiqued spoke volumes. It was now crystal clear to everyone present that what Marcus had demonstrated went far beyond what many professional mathematicians would immediately recognize. And yet you were so quick to presume that he could not possibly be the author of this work because of your preconceived ideas about his background, Dr. Carter concluded, turning his measured gaze upon Principal Davis. Principal Davis cleared his throat and said, we take academic integrity very seriously, and I understand that. But the question we should now be asking is why a student with such extraordinary natural talent was forced into the shadows, his abilities unrecognized and unsupported for so long. With a gentle yet insistent gesture, Dr. Carter placed his hand on Marcus Freeman's cherished notebook. A collection of notes, scribbles, and complex equations that embodied years of independent study and passion. This notebook represents the heart and soul of Marcus's journey in mathematics. It is not merely a compilation of numerical expressions, but a window into the mind of a brilliant young man who, despite facing systemic bias and prejudice at every turn, never stopped seeking knowledge. Mr. Freeman sat there, barely daring to breathe, as for the first time in his life, someone defended him with such heartfelt conviction. Principal Davis then posed the inevitable question. What do you propose, Dr. Carter? Dr. Carter's response was immediate and resolute. First, a formal apology must be offered to Marcus Freeman for the baseless and injurious accusations against him. Second, his academic placement must be immediately reassessed to ensure that he is given the opportunities he truly deserves, rather than being confined to a curriculum that underestimates his capacity. And third, Ms. Winters must undergo a serious evaluation of her own biases, for it is those very prejudices that have marred our academic system for far too long. By the following morning, whispers of this extraordinary event had spread throughout Westlake High, and the narrative was quickly being rewritten in corridors and classrooms alike. No longer was Marcus Freeman seen as an anomaly or an interloper. He was now the young prodigy who had solved an impossible equation and challenged a system rigged against him. That same morning, during first period, Marcus was once again summoned to Principal Davis's office, a place now charged with both tension and the hope of a long overdue transformation. This time, joining Principal Davis and Dr. Carter was his devoted mother, Denise Freeman, who had taken precious time off from her demanding job as a hospital custodian to be there for her son. Principal Davis began, in a formal tone, "Mrs. Freeman, thank you for coming on such short notice." Denise Freeman sat upright, her work uniform discreetly hidden beneath a modest cardigan, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and fierce determination. "When it comes to my son, I always make time," she replied, with a quiet but firm conviction. Dre Carter turned his attention to her with a soft smile and said, "Mrs. Freeman, I have had the privilege of reviewing Marcus's mathematical work, and it is nothing short of extraordinary. Since he was a baby, Marcus had always been fascinated by patterns in nature, from the delicate symmetry of a flower to the swirling vortex of a twister that sometimes blows across our Midwestern plains. Principal Davis then cleared his throat and stated that they had come together because they believe Marcus should be placed in an academic program that is more fitting for his remarkable abilities. Marcus could only whisper thank you, still uncertain as to how to process the rapid reversal of fate that now placed him at the center of attention for all the right reasons. Dracata then confided quietly as they walked away that he had shared Marcus's notebook, with his permission, with colleagues at MIT's mathematics department. They were thoroughly impressed and had extended an invitation to Marcus to join their summer scholars program. Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief as he murmured, "MIT? But that program is reserved for the most exceptional young mathematicians," Carter finished kindly. His voice filled with both pride and determination. He added that Marcus was indeed exceptional, and this was just the beginning of an even brighter future. Word of Marcus Freeman's vindication and subsequent opportunities spread like wildfire through the school. The very students who had once ridiculed him now approached him with curiosity and a newfound respect. Teachers who had barely taken notice of his quiet brilliance now paid close attention to every contribution he made in class. The narrative at Westlake High was shifting. Discussions about bias, unrecognized potential, and the urgent need for reform began to circulate in faculty meetings and student gatherings alike. For the first time, students from backgrounds often ignored or marginalized were stepping forward, their voices growing louder and more insistent. One afternoon, as Marcus was leaving school, Taylor Williams, once his most notorious detractor, approached him with a humility that surprised even him. "I have been thinking," Taylor said softly. "I never really saw you before. I only saw what I expected to see." The heartfelt sincerity in her words struck Marcus deeply, signaling that perhaps even those entrenched in the old ways were beginning to question their own prejudices. At home, as Marcus worked on his application for the state mathematics competition, his pencil hovered over the signature line. Doubt crept in, but his mother, Denise, appeared at the doorway and encouraged him with fond reminiscence. This moment was more than just an opportunity for academic advancement. It was a resounding declaration that the old, discriminatory ways of thinking were finally being challenged. Marcus Freeman, once hidden in the shadows, was now stepping into the light, ready to transform his pain into a powerful message of hope and retribution for all those who had doubted him. His journey was no longer a solitary struggle, but part of a larger movement aimed at dismantling the barriers that had long oppressed brilliant minds from underrepresented backgrounds. And as he walked away that day, with his mother by his side and a supportive alliance forming between his former critic and his new champion, Marcus knew that his destiny was unfolding in ways that would leave the world not only in awe, but also determined to change for the better. Marcus Freeman's journey reached another turning point that sent shockwaves through Westlake High and beyond. As Ms. Veronica Winters straightened the papers on her desk, regaining a shaky composure, she told him in a voice that barely concealed her earlier disdain that she would coordinate with Dracata on a coaching schedule. "And Marcus, thank you for this second chance. Not everyone would have offered it," she added with a forced cordiality that betrayed her inner conflict. Yet, behind those polite words lay months of cruelty and prejudice, a bitterness born of a long-held belief that talent like his did not belong in her classroom. That very week, the coaching sessions began in earnest. Dracata brought a rigor and creativity that balanced Ms. Winters' expertise in competition strategy. While Ms. Winters still struggled to reconcile her previous biased behavior, she gradually learned to ask genuine questions and take careful notes whenever Dracata pushed the boundaries of her own knowledge. Marcus watched this transformation with mixed feelings. On one hand, it was a vindication that his abilities were real and respected. On the other hand, it was a stark reminder of the deep-seated discrimination he had endured. Every session and every meeting in the newly formed Mathematical Exploration Club started initially by him, Zoe, and even Taylor Williams, of all people, was a step toward altering the prejudiced social order of Westlake. Before, the halls of Westlake echoed with scornful whispers. Now, as the math club grew to 15 members from various backgrounds, there was a palpable change in the air. Talent was beginning to be recognized over old social hierarchies, and Marcus was finally seen as more than a statistic defined by his background. His influence was measured not by the privilege of birth, but by the sheer brilliance he demonstrated every day. Amid the brewing change, the state mathematics competition loomed like an ultimate stage for his redemption. On the morning of the competition, crisp autumn sunlight bathed the prestigious Stanford Science Center, where elite competitors from affluent private schools mingled. Yet, as he walked through the glass doors, Marcus felt a calm determination bolstered by the heartfelt support of his mother, Principal Davis, Dr. Carter, and even a reformed Ms. Winters, who now wore humility like a badge of newfound respect. The competition commenced with a challenging 3-hour written test, and during lunch, dismissive whispers about him being a mere token of diversity were drowned out by the proud smiles of those who finally recognized his potential. When the final round came, a live problem-solving contest before hundreds of onlookers, Marcus, now the youngest and only representative from a public school, stepped onto the stage with measured confidence. The head judge handed him his problem card, which involved fractional calculus, a subject he had passionately explored on his own. For 20 minutes, his marker danced across the board as he explained his solution using Riemann-Liouville fractional derivatives, a method so advanced that even the elite competitors whispered in astonishment. In that electric moment, Marcus Freeman not only solved the impossible problem, but symbolically shattered the barriers of discrimination and bias that had once held him down. His triumph was a bold, brilliant retribution, a moment of awe that left every doubter speechless. Under a storm of applause that filled the auditorium, Dr. Carter beamed with unbridled pride as he watched Jordan Anderson, the young prodigy reborn with a new name and renewed purpose, step forward to accept a gleaming crystal Mobius strip trophy. Ms. Winters, once the harsh arbiter of discrimination and cruelty, sat beside him with her usual confidence now fractured by a mixture of amazement and reluctant respect. In the back, Denise Anderson pressed her hand to her mouth as tears shimmered in her eyes, a silent tribute to the sacrifices and struggles that had brought her son to this moment of vindication. The head judge ascended to the microphone with a resonant calm and announced that the mathematical insights displayed today were nothing short of extraordinary. As her measured words echoed through the hall, she declared, "This year's champion with the highest combined score in competition history is Jordan Anderson from Westlake High School." The announcement sent shockwaves through the assembled elite competitors, whose dismissive attitudes evaporated into stunned silence, while Westlake supporters erupted into ecstatic cheers. As Jordan accepted the trophy, he caught the eye of Elliot Prescott, a former rival from an exclusive private academy. Their brief nod, a silent acknowledgement between two mathematicians, transcended the rigid barriers of social class and prejudice. Returning to his seat, Jordan was enveloped in a fierce, tender hug from his mother. "I am so proud of you," Denise whispered, her voice thick with emotion and relief, affirming that every long night and every harsh word of rejection had led to this monumental triumph. Later at the reception, Ms. Winters approached with a humility that belied her former arrogance. "Congratulations, Jordan. Your solution was nothing short of revelatory," she said, her voice wavering between pride and remorse. "Thank you for your coaching," Jordan replied softly, acknowledging that even she had grown from the experience. Her admission hinted at years of misguided power and biased assumptions, an acknowledgement that the system she once enforced had been rigid and unjust. In that moment, the contrast between her past cruelty and her tentative new perspective underscored the dramatic transformation that had taken root at Westlake. Monday morning, the main hallway was adorned with congratulatory banners, and the air buzzed with anticipation as Principal Davis convened a special assembly to commemorate Westlake's first state mathematics championship in its 70-year history. "This victory belongs not only to Jordan Anderson, but to every student who dares to challenge outdated preconceptions," he declared, his voice booming with conviction. The student body responded with overwhelming applause, and members of Jordan's newly formed Mathematical Exploration Club, once an obscure group of misfits, cheered the loudest, symbolizing a sea change in the school's hierarchy. Even Taylor Williams, who had once scoffed at Jordan, now led a standing ovation, her transformation signaling the crumbling of old prejudices. As the school year drew to a close, Jordan not only completed all available mathematics courses, but also enrolled in community college classes and began preparing applications for top university summer programs. On the last day of school, a small package in his locker, a brand new leather-bound notebook with a heartfelt note from Ms. Winters, symbolized a final, sincere thank you for the lesson she learned in her 23 years of teaching. Later that evening, as Denise handed Jordan an acceptance letter from the MIT Summer Mathematics Institute, along with a full scholarship and stipend, he smiled, knowing that his equation of life was finally balanced, and that his triumph had set a powerful example for every young mind that had ever been held back by prejudice.